Last week, I described today's review as bittersweet. Why? We'll get to that later. But first, who doesn't love the Fantastic Four? Oh, shut up! Okay, the Fantastic Four have had a rough few years lately. Their comic got cancelled, their last movie was an embarrassment, and even in the comics, the team's no more. So, why should you care about this team and their history? Well, how's this for starters? Without the Fantastic Four, there would be no Marvel Universe. No Spider-Man, no X-Men, no Avengers. And don't get excited, DC fans. When writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby created the Fantastic Four, superhero comics are the minority, and the characters talked more like your parents than actual heroes. Yes, there were some goofy, fun stories being told. To me, a lot of it felt kinda bland. When Marvel writer Stan Lee decided he wanted to quit writing comics to write legitimate books, yes, even in the 1960s, being involved with comics was a shame. He decided his next book would be his last, and with frequent collaborator Jack Kirby, the king of comics, created the Fantastic Four. Its success would lead Stan to remain in comics, and the Marvel Universe was born. While Stan Lee may have come up with the original idea of the Fantastic Four, in today's story, we can almost certainly attribute its success to Jack Kirby. At this time, Lee used what was called the Marvel Method, where a writer would give the basic outline of a plot to the artist, who would then draw the story as they see fit, leaving the writers to create dialogue based on the finished art. In past stories, Stan had the Fantastic Four fight aliens, criminals, evil dictators, and was out of ideas. Supposedly, he told Kirby, this month, have the FF fight God. Kirby took that bare idea and ran with it, creating Galactus, Devourer of Worlds, a character who went beyond good and evil. But instead of telling you all this, I'll let King Kirby himself tell you what his inspirations were.
I had to come up with characters that were no longer stereotypes. In other words, I couldn't depend on gangsters. I had to get something new. And of course, for some reason, I went to the Bible. I came up with Galactus. And there I was in front of this tremendous figure who I knew very well because I've always felt him, and I certainly couldn't treat him in the same way that I would any ordinary mortal. And I remember in my first story, I had to back away from him to resolve that story. And of course, the Silver Surfer is the fallen angel. And when Galactus relegated him to Earth, he stayed on Earth. And that was the beginning of his adventures. And they were figures that had never before been used in comics. They were above mythic figures. And of course, they were the first gods.
The plot for this comic starts with Reed Richards, leader of the Fantastic Four, detecting science happening in the universe. Suddenly, the sky becomes inflamed, meteors seem to fall from the heavens, and the Watcher, basically the Marvel version of King Kai from Dragon Ball Z, breaks his vow of non-interference to warn Reed that the World Eater Galactus has discovered Earth and intends to, well, eat it. The arrival of Galactus is announced by his herald, a cosmic being known as the Silver Surfer. The Four try to fight off the Silver Surfer, but they fail, and Galactus arrives on Earth, ready to consume it. The next two issues show the Four trying everything, from technobabble solutions, flying to the edge of the universe, to just classic punching the bad guy to try and save the Earth. It's an epic story with lots of great character moments, fun action, and some wonderful new characters and devices, all from Jack Kirby's legendary imagination. Yes, I admit I'm leaving out a lot of the details here, but that's the point. I make these videos so you guys can check them out and experience the whole story yourselves, which in this case you can do with Essential Fantastic Four Volume 3 or Marvel Masterworks Fantastic Four Volume 5. If I'd had to pick, I'd say get the Masterworks book. It's more expensive and doesn't contain as much content as the Essential book, but it's all in color with the artwork beautifully reconstructed, which really helps Jack's art pop out. Plus, well, I really wanted to do this more as a tribute to the Fantastic Four. Why? Well, let's go back to me explaining why I consider this video a little bittersweet. For those of you unaware, Marvel's been slowly phasing the Fantastic Four out. The team's been split up, their comic has been cancelled, and its future is uncertain due to Marvel's ongoing dispute with Fox over the film rights. As a comic book fan, the lack of Fantastic Four is a downer. While I admit I'm not the world's biggest Fantastic Four fan, truthfully, my experience with them has mostly been reading about half of Lee and Kirby's run and reading the entirety of the Ultimate Universe series. But there's still a lot of fun to be had with these comics. The Fantastic Four, a superhero group with no secret identities, living in a real city, not a fictional Gotham or Metropolis, and occasionally experiencing infighting, were a radical change from the stuff DC was creating at the time. Their success led to the idea of superhero as pariah. A case could be made that without the Fantastic Four, superhero comics would never end up holding the place they do in pop culture today. The original stuff by Lee and Kirby showed probably the best creative team in comics history at their finest. John Byrne's revamp in the 1980s is also considered a classic, and one that I'll check out one of these days and hopefully give you recommendations for. But after 50 years of countless great and awful stories, the team is now an afterthought. Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, is hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy in what is admittedly a really fun comic that, yeah, you should check that one out. Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, he's palling around with both the Inhumans and the Avengers. As for Reed Richards, Susan Storm, and their children, Franklin and Valeria, well, I don't want to spoil the excellent Secret Wars miniseries, but yeah, the Fantastic Four is gone, but their stories will live on. These things are, after all, cyclical. Someday, the film rights will revert, the team will be back, and when Marvel's first family returns, I'll be right there to welcome them, and I hope you'll all be there with me. Well, enough of my lament. We got a big movie coming out next month. One that apparently Warner Brothers is really feeling nervous about. But you know what? Screw that. I think we should all take a look at the book that's not only influencing this movie, but has influenced the public perception of one of its main characters for over 30 years, as next week, The Dark Knight returns. You know what? I'm sorry, I'm really not done with my whole missing the Fantastic Four thing. Instead of giving you my usual spiel about follow me on blah blah blah, I'm going to close this out with a little bit of music, while reminding you to subscribe. Till then, take care, have a good one.